Hello, and welcome back to the Misfit Business Lounge podcast. I'm your host, Rosie Victoria, and today we're joined by the beautiful Jess all over again because we're ready to bring the uncensored motherhood conversations. Everything from what intimacy really means, being intimate with our partner, being intimate and present with our kids. What does it mean to really hold power in our relationships and stop giving our identity away to motherhood? So drop that like and subscribe down below and stay tuned for more monthly and weekly episodes. Alrighty, we are back with another motherhood podcast, and I'm excited for today because today we're going to be breaching on the conversation of intimacy, which I feel is like a hidden secret in relationships, in motherhood, and it can come with so much like judgment. I actually remember going on a mom's night out and somebody asking me how many times we had intimacy in a week, and then being actually shocked at how present we were within the relationship. And I feel in order to move through this as a society, we have to get comfortable with one, it is safe to be intimate. It is safe to enjoy intimacy and also to thrive in our connections in a way where maybe society doesn't normalize. So Jess, do you want to begin by just telling us what intimacy maybe means for you and how you kind of got to that point of intimacy within your relationship through motherhood and prioritizing it again and again and again and again?
So intimacy to me is not, well, I think intimacy, first of all, I think a lot of people mistake intimacy for just sex. And
Absolutely.
there's so much more to intimacy than just sex. There's all these different factors because intimacy gets to be infused throughout your entire relationship, through your entire day, whether you're with your partner constantly or not. So intimacy to me, and I know intimacy to my partner means connecting deeply, emotionally, having meaningful conversations. Intimacy means allowing ourselves to joke and have fun and joy together and infuse those little joyous moments with touch. And we're not just roommates laughing with each other. Like we also, we have this lover aspect to us, whether we're best friends or not. And intimacy, I think, also means allowing yourself to be vulnerable with your partner. Because there's really no intimacy without vulnerability. If you're sitting there saying like, oh well, we have intimacy, but there's no vulnerability, that kind of is just like you're fucking. There's no like there's very little, and I dare I say, like I get cringy too, but there's like no love making there either in the intimacy. You need to have like the two sides of this coin, and vulnerability is what brings that. And vulnerability also can bring a lot of spice to your intimacy if we're talking about, the sex part of it. So I think vulnerability is massive in intimacy as well.
And I think it's like that after an argument sex where there's that rush of emotion and you're like, oh, this feels so passionate and good because you've been able to be vulnerable. And even though you've
Yeah.
maybe had an argument and expressed it in the wrong way, it needed to come out and there needed to be open communication. And I know for me, I can't function in an environment where there is not open communication.
Oh my God, me neither at all.
Yes, and I need to know that my partner can see how I need to communicate even when I don't know how to communicate. Because I
Hmm.
think we go through different chapters in motherhood. And actually, a couple of days ago, Lewis sat me down and he was like, I think you need to go away for a few days on your own. And I was like, what? I was kind of offended because I was like, you're telling me to leave the house for a few days? What the fuck? And he was like, no, you look tired. I feel like you just need a few days where you can just sleep, you can relax, you don't have to do anything. And I was a little bit protective of that because I think as a mom, we pride ourselves on being able to do everything and be everything. And I was like, no, I'm good. Like, I feel really good. He was like, that's not what I said. I said, you're tired. And deep down, I was tired because Freddie's not sleeping very well and he's had like
Right.
every virus going this winter.
Yeah.
He's waking several times a night, and I couldn't remember the last time I had like a proper night's sleep. You know, when you get into the toddler bed and then
Yes.
you wake up in the morning and your body's stiff and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, why did I do this?
Hmm.
And the truth was, I was tired, but I didn't want to face that myself. And so he had to reflect that. And so we came up with this agreement of I don't need to go away, but what I do need is like uncensored sleep. So today I
Yeah.
didn't wake up till 12 noon because he left me in bed. He did the school run, he taught the kids, and he just like left me to chill it out. And you know, when you keep waking up and then you go back to sleep, and then you keep waking up and go back to sleep, I was like, oh, this is divine. But I
Yes.
had to release all the shame with just giving myself comfort to just
Mhm.
be there and feel that, and also let somebody else tell me what I needed, which can
Yeah.
sometimes be really uncomfortable as a woman that likes to lead her own reality.
Yes, 100%. And I feel that. I get that because John, one of the things that like I actually talk to a lot of moms about this, where they feel like they're the primary parent and like the husband doesn't necessarily one see what they need, or maybe they see them as almost like robotic, where like, okay, well, you've always done this, and so you should be able to do it all, and this is just your job. Um, but it is hard to even having a partner that does see you give up control, because there are mornings. There have been recently over the holiday break, we had a Saturday morning where like John could just tell I was done. He could tell I was out, like I needed to sleep. I didn't have the patience. I had been up. Gabe got up. We were transitioning from pull up to undies overnight, so we're up a bunch of times, and he just got out of bed. He was like, let's go, guys. That's it. Let's go. Leave mom alone. Shut the door. Came out here and started the whole breakfast thing. And I was like, so I, so I sleep now. Like, it was like, I was like, okay, and I like, I tried and I slept, and it was like it's nice to have somebody take care of you. Absolutely. But it is hard to let go of that control. And I think that comes from like a long time of hearing, around us, the stories around us, and maybe even like the way we grew up in family ties and stuff about what a woman should be in a marriage.
Absolutely.
And I think it does add to that layer of intimacy when your partner looks at you and sees what you need and sees, who you are, and like what is necessary for you, not other women, but what's necessary for you to survive.
Yes. And I always say to Lewis, I always joke that I would be the perfect housewife if all I wanted to be was a housewife. Like, if all I
Same.
got joy from was cooking and cleaning, like, yes, I would be amazing at that. But the reality is, it doesn't light me up to be that woman, and it doesn't light me up to give in that way. And so I have to accept that I can't be everything to everything all of the time. And
Yeah.
that has been such like a eye opener that I feel has got more real in my reality the last 6 months, because I had to realize, okay, yes, I can be the present mom, but also like it's okay for me to have a boundary there. It's okay for me to say, like, I'm touched out, I'm tapped out, give me a minute. Because I
Yeah.
think sometimes I was so afraid of saying, go solo play for a minute, that I was giving energy that I didn't have to give. And then it was
Hmm.
just leaving me in this position at the end of the day where I was like, oh, I've got nothing left to give to my partner. Do you feel like do you feel like you have to have boundaries with your kids in order to be able to give something then to your partner? Because I feel like with me, I've got to get the divide right.
I think, yes. First of all, I think there needs to be boundaries with your kids, period, so that you don't lose your absolute fucking mind, for lack of better words. And I think it's something that the world and moms have been divided on for a really long time, because there's many different ways to parent, and I think it actually has to do with your personal makeup. I'm going to share a little bit of a story as I tuck and fold my sourdough, even though we're on a podcast right now, because I am sitting here being everything. Um, when you said that, when you were like, I love to cook and I love to do that and all the things, I was like, fuck, I haven't tuck and folded in an hour. Um, but when Ava hit my daughter, so my daughter Ava, if you guys don't know, she's 8 years old. She just turned 8. My son is 4, about to turn 5. And John and I have always been really, we didn't stop being like loving in front of our kids. Like, we always were like, it's okay. Daddy's gonna grab mom's butt, and that's the way that it goes. And daddy's gonna hug mommy, and you're gonna wait while daddy hugs mommy. It's not that, you're gonna overrun one of us. We need our time, and then you're gonna come hug us, or whatever. And we started like actually talking about the boundaries with Ava when she turned, I think she was about 5. And bedtimes got a little bit more hard. She started questioning more stuff, and she started getting a little more vocal. And we finally sat her down, and we said, look, there's one, you go to bed at the time because my kids always went to bed super early. And they
Mine
slept.
too. But they need that. And everyone's
Yeah, they
always like,
need it.
what? You put your kids to bed at like half six? I'm like, if they don't go to bed at half
Yeah.
six, ready to sleep by 7 o'clock, they're a nightmare. And I just
Yeah.
recognize that they prefer to be morning people. But
Mhm.
also, I'm kind of getting to the point now where I think Luna is going to start to want to go a little bit later, which is fine. We adjust. But then that does take an adjustment in your relationship. And you're like, oh, now
Yes.
we've lost a little bit more of that time.
We're doing that right now, actually. We just adjusted because we noticed we're like Ava is just Gabe also has more energy than Ava did, period. Like different kids are different. However, he still went to bed at the 6:30 mark with Ava. Um, but we are in the process of figuring it out with Ava because now all of a sudden she's really kind of not tired till like 7:30. And so we're adjusting. But the conversation we had with Ava when she hit 5 finally was we said, you go to bed because you need sleep, one. And two, mommy and daddy are not just mommy and daddy. And I remember the first time we said it to her for real and she understood it and she was like, what? And we were like, we love you and we love being mommy and daddy, but mommy and daddy we kind of had to bring awareness to the fact that we were together before you. We were here together as a couple before you even existed. And so when you go to bed, mommy and daddy get to have mommy and daddy time. We get to be Jess and John. And so we kind of framed it as like, I'm Jess and daddy's John when you go to bed and we get to, eat dinner together and we get to sit down. And I think having the conversation with the kids, I might have even been younger than 5. It might have been 4. It was when she started preschool. So yeah, it was probably 4. Um, when you have that conversation and make yourself a real person to the kids, they understand it. We don't talk to our kids like they're real people. And I mean, I talk to my kids like they're kids all the time. Don't get me wrong. I bite my kids' faces all day long and tell them they're fucking adorable, but we have real conversations. And, it was something I think that a lot of people didn't do. So when people used to ask, like, how do you frame it to her that like she has to go to bed? Well, because we're people and we have to, and I also explained it like I use toys. I was like, toys have batteries and they need to either be changed or recharged. I said, could you imagine if you had to stay up and keep taking care of somebody all night long and all day long? Do you think you'd have any energy the next day to play? And she was like, no. And I was like, okay. So mommy and daddy need that time at night to recharge our battery. And we need time at night to
Yes.
connect with each other because we get to be better parents in the morning when we get to connect with each other. And so we hardcore set boundaries for that. And now, with Ava staying up later, we came up with a new plan. We were like, you can stay up later, but the rule is you have to stay in bed and read. You can stay up, you
Mhm.
can read as long as you want, but you're going to have to stay in your room doing, your thing. You can't come out 100 times. And, so we're trying to work with her and also, keep the intimacy in our relationship because we had about over November, December, where we started feeling like, holy shit, we're really tapped out and we don't have time. We don't feel like we don't have the time or energy for each other. And we had maybe 2 weeks of that before we were both like, whoa, this is not going to work for us. We need to fix this because we're used to the time.
And it has a knock-on effect on like home life. I know that if I don't get that time with Lewis, the home dynamic, we're not as patient, we're not as, intimate with the kids in a sense of playing and being present and all of the things that comes from you having time. And
Yes.
even just touching on the intimacy thing, I think a lot of people waste time not being intimate with their kids, not being present with their kids, and then feeling bad when in reality, if you had the boundary in place of this is kids' time, this is our time, it would be so much easier to be present, where you
Yeah.
actually leave the situation with your kids feeling fulfilled, feeling satisfied. And I think
100.
that we underestimate how intelligent children actually are. Like, I
Mhm.
was telling my mom the other day how when I do something out of line, I will sit the kids down and I'll say, look, sorry, mommy shouldn't have spoke that way. I was stressed, da da da. And I try to explain like what's triggered a certain response. And obviously then it's our responsibility to make sure we don't do the same thing again and again because then it becomes an unhealthy pattern. But I do feel like we have to outwardly vocalize. These are things that years ago parents didn't do. It was like, I'm the parent, I know best. That's it, done. You're going to
Yeah.
bed. And you didn't test the boundaries. But in today's society, I feel like it's okay, I'm gonna explain things. I'm gonna bring you into the understanding of where I'm at emotionally, energetically. Then I'm gonna get comfortable with the boundaries. And I feel even having boundaries in today's day and age. I don't know about you, but with mom friends, like I test the water of what kind of mom are you first before I know like are we gonna vibe? Like, are you the mom that's gonna sit here and have the intimacy conversation with me and desire to be around your partner and desire to, live a very intimate and gentle life with your children, yet know when there's a fucking time for a boundary and the
Yeah.
choice in you? And if I kind of sense that that's not the case, I'm like, okay, I'm backing away a little bit here. You're not my person.
Yep. Oh no, I agree. I do the same thing because one of my red flags with mom friends. And like, granted, I think they're part of this is that people don't know any other way to be, and the bonding over negativity thing is just easy for a lot of
Mhm.
people. But one of my red flags is women who constantly talk shit about their husband. Not like have a conversation where you're like, fuck, we had a fight, it sucked. Like that's you need to have those conversations with the women around you too. But the women who constantly are shit talking their partner, for me, I it's not like I have a problem with you. It's just more like I don't engage in that. Like I know John would never sit around at work talking about something that pissed him off about me and like just shit talking. And I would never
Yes.
do that either because you bring that home. It's like I would never be able to come home and be like, "Hey, honey." And no, I just, sat there talking about him and he's going to see these people who I just talked, about him too and whatever. And I do the same thing, especially with the boundaries with the kids thing too.
I don't know about you as well, but I find that men have, and this is going to rock the boat. The women listening to this going to be like, "What did she just say?" But I feel like men, period, have more respect in that department. Like
Hmm.
you don't see many men sat there when they go out with their friends discussing their partner. They tend to just focus on being the boys again, being the lads again, like having that fun and interaction. And I don't know what happens with mums. It's like we suck ourselves silly and then decide that when we socialize, we're going to speak about the kids. We're going to speak
Hmm.
about how overwhelming that environment is. We're going to
Yeah.
speak about our partners and just rant, which there's a place for ranting, but where is the time to just be us again?
Do you know what I actually think? You want to know my unfiltered opinion about this? My unfiltered opinion on this topic is women don't have or are not giving themselves the space to vent to their partner, which is who they need to be talking to. So instead of having the hard conversation with their partner about how hard motherhood is, or how something that they did was bothering them, they then say, okay, well, let me go to my friends and do this because they're going to commiserate and they're going to agree with me and I don't have to deal with the confrontation or the hard feelings that come along with talking to my partner which is who I should be talking to about it. And that's going to probably ruffle feathers, but it's the honest to God truth and I've seen it. It's what I see on a daily basis, how I can even like count the amount of times that I've spoken to women. It's all in the fucking I feel like the pickup line happens a lot. So if anyone from the pickup line's listening, they know what I'm talking about, but what are you going to do? Or not even just the pickup line, like dance or whatever. I witness mothers saying things about like their partner that I said, like, have you thought about maybe saying that to your partner? You know what I mean? Have you thought about maybe saying like, hey, I want to communicate something to you. This bothered me or whatever. And also like you need to be able to let off steam about the kids together. Like your partner is in the house living with you. So you should be able to say to your partner, I know that not everybody has this luxury because not everybody has the communication, which is something that needs to get worked on if you don't have it. But you almost, again, total unpopular opinion. So you almost need to like be able to look at your partner after you're like Ava's 8. She mouths off. Love her to death. She's got a lot of my mouth. You need to be able to turn around, look at your partner and be like, the fuck just happened there? That was bitchy. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
whisper, you need to have those moments with your partner where you're like, fuck, what the fuck, and instead of like, thinking your partner's going to judge you for thinking like that and realizing, you're human and both of you are human. You're both probably thinking the same thing. So talk to each other instead of bringing it to girls' night out, where you really need to just
Mm.
be letting loose and having the fun and talking about whatever the fuck else you want to talk about, you know?
Oh, I can literally hear Freddie having his meltdown in the background, speaking of children. But something that prompted for me is the conversation, because this is probably my default bad habit that I picked up from my parents, and I have to really recognize this inside of me, and it can be hard to see your own shadow, right? So my parents were separated, and at this time they separated when I was about 5, and co-parenting wasn't really a thing. You didn't see people have these co-parenting apps and like be working in perfect harmony. It was more this person's here, that person's there, and like then we swap kids type of situation. And so I always kind of saw my first of all, my parents didn't have very many boundaries. I think my mom was a single mom, so she was always tapped out and she just didn't have the place for boundaries. And so I had to really learn that. But also then now being in a relationship where we are together and we're this team and we're doing parenting together, there'll be sometimes ways that Lewis is parenting and I'm like, that is not my way of parenting. And I want to like vocalize something, and at times I do, and then I'm like, why have I just done that? Because at the end of the day, like, that was needed, and I need to recognize that my default is to be the harmony in the situation, and if I'm asking for help, then I can't then resist the help. And
Mhm.
I think that that is such an unhealthy pattern that, again, as women, we want the help, but are we willing to actually let our partner step in and parent and do the things? Such as this
Yeah.
morning, you know, in my head, I'm like, I want to do the lunchbox and I want to see the kids off to school. And then I'm like, actually, I'm really fucking tired and I want to sleep. And so, whatever, like if he puts one too many treats in the lunchbox, whatever, it will be fine. I really don't care in this minute. And so you have to get comfortable if you're asking for help. What does it look like to actually sink into that help and to let somebody else step up, even if it's not your way?
Yeah. Yeah, I completely I agree with you and I understand what you're saying. And I think, one of the things that actually when you were talking, it was reminding me of like when, we get into a situation where like, well, like let's say one of the kids is having a meltdown and I think like, okay, this is the way it needs to be handled. And John, and we're both in it together. And he's like, this is the way it needs to be handled. And one of us gets to the situation before the other, like one of us takes off. And, how do you handle that moment where like, you both have to kind of parent together and be united and show the child that like, okay, like mommy and daddy, you can't turn us on each other. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. They're
but we
the
have
enemy, not us.
right, yeah, like, but we have different ideas on how to deal with this. And I think one of the big things that we both do is we tend to tap in and out. So like when John's had too much, he'll be like, and now I need to walk away before I say something fucked, or I'll be like, I need to walk away before because I'm a screamer. I'm Mars and Aries. I'm loud. Even when I'm not loud, I'm still a loud human being. And I know when I'm about to blow. So I know when I need to say to John, like, I need to step away. And one of the things that we had said early on, and I feel like that kind of it plays into like the seceding control to your partner. Like you need to say, like, okay, like we agreed to this. Like we agreed to tap in and out. We agreed to help each other and not just let one person deal with it and be like, yeah, she's got it or he's got it, unless that was agreed upon. But one of the things we talked about in the very beginning was not to contradict each other in front of the kids, unless it's a situation where like, like everybody, like I said, you said you have conversations with your kids when you like, maybe do something that you don't like or whatever. Fine. We all have those moments. So I'm sure there's been times when like I said something and in the moment, John's needed to be like, rein it in. Okay. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
we do it in a way that's more like, okay, now mommy's now mommy's gonna step into the other room, or like now daddy's gonna go inside and we're gonna handle it. And it's almost like our cue to be like, I need to rein it in. I need to take, a rain check for like 2 seconds and take, care of myself for a second before I re-enter the situation. But that was one of the things we agreed on early on is we don't contradict each other in front of the kids. We stand as a united front. We support each other. And if there's an issue, we kind of walk into the other room and talk about it. Or like if we don't agree with like the timeout or whatever it is that we just put in place, we say, okay, go do that. And then we pull each other aside and talk about it real quick rather than, showing the child that like you can get over on mommy or get over on daddy. Like there's no secrets in this house. There's no don't tell mommy or don't tell daddy about this. And I think that's important because it kind of makes the control and like giving up there's no giving up of the power. It's balanced, it's even. And I think that's something that doesn't happen in a lot of households because it's like you said, it's not the way that we grew up. The parents were right and that was it. And usually it was one parent that was the disciplinarian.
It was like when your dad came running up the stairs and you knew you were in the shit and you'd hide under the covers because you were like, oh my God. And
Yeah.
like, I just feel like you just knew not to test the boundaries. But I
Hmm.
think my downfall is when I know I'm going to blow, it's usually that I haven't asserted the boundary soon enough. So then the boundary is just overspilled and overspilled. And then we get to a point where it's like, no, enough of the boundary. Like, I need to be stronger in this. I need to be firmer in this. The other day we picked the kids up. It was date night on Saturday, and that like went a little bit off track in itself.
I saw that and I was like, yes, they're on date night. Go for it, girl. Yes, I saw that.
Yes. But I went into date night being a little bit hot-headed because Lewis had taken the initiative to buck in a date night and get us a sitter. So he'd reached out to my mom and he'd said, hey, can you have the kids overnight on this night? And I was like, great. He's like taking the initiative.
Yeah.
He's bucked in a sitter. But then it got to the morning and he'd not bucked anything for us to do. And so I was
Oh,
like, what are we doing tonight? And he was like, I don't know, we could do this or we could do this. And I was like, but have you bugged anything? And he
yeah.
was like, no, not yet. And so, like, I was instantly triggered. It wasn't the fact that I hadn't booked anything. It was like, I want you to take initiative. I don't want to have to take care of this. I take care of the dentist appointments, the doctor's appointments, take care of date night. And so
Yeah.
I was like, oh, you haven't booked anything. Da-da-da-da. And then he booked this restaurant, which was a very nice restaurant, and we ended up eating at. But I was like, I don't want to eat there. That's basic food. I don't want that. He was like, you have such high standards. And I was like, yeah, well, if I had high standards, you would have booked somewhere for us to eat. And I was like, offloading. In the
Rosie, we're
end,
very
we had
similar humans. I'm sorry, I mean to cut you off. We're very similar human beings. Continue, please.
a
Like,
we had a
continue.
great date night. We ate at the restaurant. The food was great, and then we decided to go to bingo, which was a bit of a laugh rather than just sitting and
Mhm.
like eating food and drinking and whatever. But it was that reminder of, in that moment, it's okay to ask for what we need. Like Lewis got it. He needed to step up and make sure he was taking care of things. I needed to vent that I was frustrated that he hadn't take care of things. And I think sometimes it's valid to challenge our partner to be the one that steps up and can kind of offer something more. Because, like I said to him whilst we were on date night, I love that you taken the initiative to buck in the date night in the first place. But actually, what would have felt really, really good for me is to not have to think about a thing. Like, I want you to take me to a place. I don't want to have to think about it. Because when he uses his mind into what I want, he always gets it dead right. And he's done some beautiful date nights over the years. And so it just kind of felt like, okay, now we've got this night. I don't want to sit in the house. I don't want to lose the evening. Like, I want to make the most of this. What are we gonna do?
It's funny that you had that conversation because John and I had this, what's today? Thursday? We had a conversation about this 2 days ago because we're very, very fortunate that my parents take the kids one weekend night. Like, so they'll have a slumber party on like a Friday night, or Saturday
Love that.
night most weeks. And so because we noticed how much we needed it for our marriage. And so we asked for it. And my mom also was very big in like, my mom was revolutionary when I was little. Like they made sure they had time for themselves. Like I watched my parents be really loving, and like make sure that they had their time together and whatever. And so when I had kids, she was like, you're going to have the same thing, except I'm going to do more than like my family was able to do for me. So I'm very lucky that my parents do that. So Friday nights are our date night. And I think there's this like beauty in it, but then there's also this like us knowing that we have the date night every Friday night. On occasion through the years, we've kind of let date night slip and it starts to feel
It's so
routine.
easy though, because you're like, do I want to go out or do I want to fucking sleep
Yeah.
and
And
not
you get
move?
tired. Yeah. And you get tired and you're like, we could just do takeout. Like it's not a big deal. Like let's do takeout and pick a movie. And then it's 9 o'clock and one of you sleeping on the couch and you're like, we're not having sex tonight. You know what I mean? And it's like, fuck. And so I think over the years, it's become, we've had these bits. And so I think we got into a bout of it recently. And we just had this conversation because we've been fucking tired. Because like you said, Freddie said everything, everyone's always been, we're sick. We keep having colds and this and that. And it was the holidays and whatever. And we got into this routine of like date night, Friday night, like woohoo, like we're going to do takeout. I'm not going to cook. And then finally we were like, we fucking hate all the takeout. Jess's food is butter. We'll cook and hang out at the same time. And it became just like, okay, we're going to eat dinner and watch a movie and that's it. And so we had this big talk about it where we were like, we absolutely are budgeting in a date night every week. Like we're not just going to, and it's not going to be straight.
Yes.
We're budgeting it. It's a part of the fucking weekly, thing that we do. And I said to John, I was like, I want to hear in the middle of the week, hey, honey, what would you like to do for date night? It's not me always saying, hey, honey, because I'm notorious for wanting very specific kinds of food and elevated food and whatever. So I think over the years, he's been more like, what do you want to eat? Because I'll just go do that with you, whatever, because I
Yep.
care a lot about the food that we eat. And I said to him, I said, I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you, like, hey, honey, let's go for date night and then let's do poker, or like, let's go to this restaurant and then I really want to come home and like watch this movie. Let's like buy it and have it ready to go on the TV when we get home and or whatever. And that was the conversation we just had because that's the thing. Like we are, as even when it is balanced, we're still mom, and so we kind of do become default even when we're not default because we're mother. That's the way that it works.
Yes.
And maybe that'll change over the years, but that's the way it is. And we need to be taken care of. That's why we like getting a coffee out. You know what I mean? That's why like we need, even with intimacy, this is a topic. I feel like you're gonna be like, huh, let's talk about that. That's why sometimes like I mean, I don't want to initiate sex. all the time.
Yes,
I don't
yes.
want
And
to
then
be the
they're
one
like,
who
well, you can initiate sometimes. And I'm like, okay, give me a hint and I'll initiate. But I'm not gonna make the
yeah,
first like little stroke or touch. You
yeah,
do what
you
I
want it,
want you to
yeah.
do.
Yeah, we want that, and that's what I mean about like being able to communicate with your partner about that stuff. Like, I think when the kids were younger and I was more tired, John was more kind of like playing off of my cues. And I was sitting there waiting for him to like tap in. And I'd be like, well, we'd be going to bed. And I'd be like, so we're just, why aren't you, you know? And he'd be like, well, it seemed like you were tired. So I didn't. And I'd be like, I don't care if I'm tired. Just tap in anyway. Like, initiate it, bud, you know, whatever. And so over the years, like, we've had that discussion a million times, like not only with the date night, like you're gonna help me plan it or you're gonna plan it, you're going to initiate the intimacy of the night too. Like we're not just going to chuckle with each other all night and then get in bed and get to it. Like, you know, there's got to be stuff.
God.
It's reversed over the years because John actually used to be the one who needed more of the intimacy before and the love. And
Hmm.
I think I was more on like, let's go fuck. You know what I mean? And he was like,
Yeah.
what the fuck? Can you hug me? You know? And like, and I'd be like, yeah, you know, whatever. And then we had this massive like cracking open last year or 2 years ago. And I was like, oh my God, honey, I think I need the intimacy before and after. And he was like, welcome to my world. I can do that, you know?
I
So
think
now,
after is so important because everybody speaks about the intimacy before, but no one
yes.
wants to feel like sex is an exchange. We don't want to have sex and then just like, in movies when they have the beautiful cuddles, and in reality, it's like, okay, let's get cleaned up.
No,
Like,
yes, 100%. You need to, and that's something that we recently, I want to say in the last couple of years, that's been like, may I share this? My gut's saying yes, so I'll share it. Maybe it'll help some people. We noticed sometimes after we would be close, intimate, whatever you want to call it, we had a bout where we actually would kind of argue a little bit. Where like there'd be like snippiness after, and we hated it. Like both of us have always been very vocal about wanting to communicate. So it would happen and we'd be like, what the fuck is wrong with us? Like we, you know, we just work really close and whatever. And then it occurred to me, I was like, we need to not just jump out of bed after. And he was like, oh my God, you're right. We do. We finish. And then we're like, okay, got to get to bed. It's late. Let's get cleaned up and go to
mhm.
bed because we both have Virgo in us and we can't just roll over and go to sleep after that. And we both decided we were like, we need to immediately cuddle. Like we need to snuggle and stay there together because that's, and we didn't have to force ourselves to do it. It's like what we naturally had wanted, but didn't, we just didn't think about it because we have kids and we have life and we got to go to bed and get up. And taking the time to actually be intimate after and talk, it opens up a lot of conversations too. Because I mean, like, give me a break. You were just like literally on top of each other. It's
Yeah.
hard to not talk afterwards or be open with each other afterwards, you know? And so it started some really good conversations too.
Yeah, and that just takes me to a boundary we've had to put in at the minute because Luna is still at the age where she'll like wander in the middle of the night and she gets in our bed. And we used to let her get in between us. And now I'm like, look, you can sleep in my room, but you're sleeping at this side. Like, I want to cuddle your dad for a minute before I go to sleep. Or I want to make sure that I've had like my fix of the one thing I love is a hair tickle before bed. And so I want that. And I'm not willing to compromise that because
Yeah.
if we go to bed completely, I know some people love this and they love like sleeping separate, but for me, like I need a touch and then like I'll move to my own position. And
Mhm.
so we've had to kind of start putting her on the side. Yeah, you need some comfort, stay in our bed, whatever. I'm tired at this point, sleep where you want. But
Mhm.
I am going to have the intimacy that I need first and have that cuddle with dad. And then, I can cuddle you and be whatever you want me to be to you.
Yeah. And I think that's really important too, because you're speaking to somebody, I sleep on John's chest every single night. That is how whether we've fought or not, like I fall asleep on his chest. And it's for both of us. It's not just for me. So it's this thing that we have. And I think it's really important for the kids to understand that because same, like we don't sleep apart. We don't like to sleep apart. And if a kid crawls into our bed, they're crawling on either side of us because we do. We like to, even if it's like an arm or a foot in our sleep, we like touching. And I think that the kids seeing that is really important because it shows them that, I always say this to Ava and Gabe. I'm always like, when you grow up, if you want a partner, it's important that you keep this. It's important that you make sure you always love each other and that you show each other that you love each other. And it's one thing to say it, but it's a totally different thing to instill it in them through what they're seeing, and experiencing.
Absolutely, because I didn't have parents that were together. I didn't see that. And I do feel like then you have to learn what does it look like to keep the intimacy in a relationship because
Mhm.
when my parents were separated, there was no love and affection. There was no appreciating of one another. There was no like, mom did this really well today, dad did this really well. Like, there was none of that. And so then after having children, I feel like I had to realize, okay, like we can keep this, but what does this even look like? And
Yeah.
actually, then even going back to boyfriends that I've had or dated, I'd never seen my mom being like taken on a date or taken out, like made a big deal of. And so it's really easy in your teenage years to let that guard down and, go on a date with somebody who really just wants to Netflix and chill you, and there is no intimacy and there is no spark. And so I almost had to teach myself that standard. And this is the conversation actually Lewis and I had at the weekend around like the reason why I want this is because I've had to teach myself to be like this. It's not in my nature to have the expectation for somebody to show up for me in this way because I didn't see it and I didn't have any representation of that in my reality. And so growing up, I definitely leaned into relationships that were toxic and couldn't serve me and were me overgiven, and I'm not willing to do that anymore. And so if you don't show your kids that, what is the standard going to be for them? And that goes equally, not just to your daughter, but to your son, because I know you
Yes.
have both like me. And I want, like, Freddie bought me some, obviously Lewis bought them, but he brought me some flowers when I woke up late this morning. And I was like,
Mm,
oh, my little heart. But
I
I
love
want
that.
him to see how to treat whoever he's with, whether that be a man, a woman, whatever. Like, I want him to know how to shower somebody with appreciation, but I also want him to feel seen as a man, which is something that I think a lot of people might be good at teaching their boy to be a man and to shower somebody else and to appreciate somebody else. But can you also allow him to feel seen in his emotions? Because
Yeah.
society has a long way to come with that. And I
So
think we have to teach our, especially our boys, like, I'm gonna honor what your dad is feeling and moving through as much as you, so that you can feel that when you get bigger, like, you need to be in relationships that don't just see you as, let's say, that old energy of be the provider, but you're not emotional. Because if we look back years ago and I look at my granddad figures, they weren't emotional people. They weren't people that would kind of interfere too much with the family direction. They were there, they were authorities, they were providers, but that emotional attunement was missing.
that's interesting. I that just to backtrack a tiny bit, I actually had like a little bit of the flip side because I grew up with my dad. My parents have always been very obsessed with each other. Like we routinely would walk in the kitchen and be like, "Stop kissing! What the fuck, guys?" Like that was what we grew up with. And um, my dad is a really, really supportive husband, and my dad also has. I was lucky. I saw him have emotions, and I think it was so interesting because I kind of thought my dad was the anomaly because a lot of the men around us are not like that, and we're not like that. Even a lot of my uncles were not like that, and I have a lot of I'm an Italian. I have this gigantic Italian family. So a lot of my family members were not like that. And my dad was. And I actually thought to myself, like, my dad's an anomaly. What's the likelihood that I'm going to find somebody like that? Um, and then I started dating and I was kind of like, you're a boy, you're not a man. Fuck right off. This isn't going to work. This isn't going to work. This isn't going to work. And then John showed up and he was my best friend. And I watched him as my best friend, being like the man that also had emotion and like showing at me as his best friend the emotion or whatever. And then, we got together and I was like, wow, that he's not my dad's not the anomaly. Like I actually ended up having something like this. This is kind of incredible. And one of the things that he does with Gabe all the time and with Ava is he'll like if I cook breakfast or something, he'll be like, "Hey, mommy, thank you so much for doing what you just did. Thank you for making breakfast, mommy." And then at the end, he'll clean up the table. But I don't want it to be like this thing where like it's expected that daddy just cleans up the table because mommy cooked or vice versa. So I'll say, "Hey, guys, thank daddy for cleaning up the table. Daddy, mommy cooked, daddy cleaned. There's this balance here." And so I think, it's important to show like, yeah, like he has emotions too. You have to thank him too. Like he cares and he feels what, he's is going on around this house. And I think that also has to do with like, yeah, when the babies have a tantrum
Hmm.
and, you know, I feel like the natural inclination is that like, okay, the dad's going to be the disciplinarian, the mom's going to be the softer one. And I think it's time to break that shit in the household 100%. Like
Yes.
John has this ability to get through to the kids, to have conversations with the kids about emotions that actually even shock me sometimes because I know how he talks to me, and I know, and that's all fine and good, but it's a totally different thing seeing your man be able to get on the floor. And like Ava lost it. She's 8. She's getting a little hormonal. And we see it happening, and it's usually around the time I'm hormonal. And last week, I feel like this is gonna make you have a little chuckle. Last week, she lost it, like out of nowhere. She was upset that her pasta kept getting cold, and she started crying. And she was like, "I can't eat it fast enough. My pasta keeps getting too cold." And we were like, "All right, we'll warm it up." And she was like, "No, daddy." Like she gave him so much attitude over this pasta. And then he said something else, tried to fix it, and she like gave him such massive attitude that normally we would have been like, "Hey, you're losing your phone." You know what I mean? Like, what the
Yeah.
fuck? But we could tell like she was about to cry. Then she like screamed on the top of her lungs and like ran away. And like John was like, and he was like, I'm gonna go deal with it. Because he could see that she wasn't okay. It was like past that point where you're like, you're in trouble. It was like, you're not okay. And now I need to help you regulate. And I found them like 10 minutes later, cuddled up on the bedroom floor. And he was just like holding her
Oh.
and rocking her. And I was like, everything okay? And she was like, I'm really sorry I lost it like that. Like, I don't know what happened. And John was like, this is what we talked about. And I was like, wow, this is like something that you want for your kids. Like Gabe saw John not lash out because Gabe's in the corner, like staring at what the why is she yelling? And like both of us like crept in there, and like Gabe got to witness that. Gabe got to witness Daddy holding Ava, Daddy talking to Ava rather than Daddy doling out this punishment. You know, and I thought it was important for both kids. I was like, this is kind of big for both of them to see stuff like this.
And it's healthy. I think sometimes, we need to see that from more than just our mum, because stereotypically mums are the ones that are emotionally in tune and they're gonna have your back, and that like mama bear instinct clicks in. But I think dads can deliver it in a different way. And while we might offer the emotional conversation in a very emotional way, they kind of
Yes.
offer it in an emotional plus logic, and kind of like make
Yes.
solution, and like it all ties together in one.
100%. And John, I've had to have I don't know about you guys, but we've had to have conversations about that over the years. Like when I'm talking to him and I just need him to listen versus when I need advice.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
And I
Yeah.
think a lot of women struggle with that, where they're like, I was trying to talk to my husband, and he just kept telling me like I was wrong and this is what I needed to do. When really you need to have a conversation where you say to your husband, I don't need advice right now. I just need you to support, And I think a lot of that communication kind of gets lost in the like male female, fray here.
And I will admit that sometimes, like, I need the solution. And I think that's why Lewis and I work so well, because there'll be times where I'm like, I don't want the solution. I just want you to hold me emotionally. And deep down, like, what I'm looking for is the solution he's given for me, but I'm not willing to choose it. And so
Yeah.
I guess it's getting that divide right of, yeah, like, let yourself go emotionally, but know that in some ways, when that solution is coming to the surface, it's coming from love. And so you have to get that balance right and that communication right. But what's interesting is, so where you have the support network and on a Friday night your parents have the kids and all of that stuff, we don't necessarily have that. If we want a date night, we have to schedule that like months and months and months in advance. And so it's so easy for us to become complacent because we don't have that big network and that big village. And something we've been speaking about is, how are we going to cultivate that in the house? Like, what does it look like to date when the kids go to bed at, 6:30, 7 o'clock on a Friday night? How are we gonna build that intimacy? Because
Yes.
it's so easy to get comfortable. And so now
Yes.
I'm like, how can we challenge? And have you seen those murder mystery packs you can buy on Amazon?
Yes.
We bought one of those last year and we did it in the house, and it was so fun. Like, we sat there for hours, like decoding
Oh,
it.
that sounds cool.
Yes, honestly, highly recommend. I mean, you need a couple of hours because it's bulletproof, but it just got us working together in a different way and out of our comfort zone and like moving in a different energy. You don't always have to be spending money to enjoy that time together, but you do have to prioritize the time.
I completely agree. So it's interesting that you said that about date night. I'm always like, it's so interesting that you said that because there's always like these thoughts in the back of my mind. There have definitely been bouts of time where like, remember like when COVID was big, obviously like date nights weren't happening then because we weren't
Yeah.
mingling and, whatever. And there have been, and John wasn't, most people weren't working, like John was home. And there's been periods of time where he's, been in between, he's a crane operator. So there'll be times where he has like a couple weeks off here and there, whatever. And it is easy to get fucking complacent, especially when you don't have the babysitting. Because like I said, we've gone through bouts where we just haven't had it because people were sick or whatever. And you have to make an ordinary night. You have to find ways to make like a Tuesday night a date night. And it's easy to not, it's easy to fall into this pattern of like, well, we don't have time, we're tired, whatever. And I actually think it comes from being intentional. It comes from being really intentional and planning and knowing instead
Yeah.
of just saying like, okay, like we're gonna do something fun tonight, or we're gonna be really intentional and put our phones down. I'm like, that's the first step. But like saying like, yeah, we're gonna buy the murder mystery thing, or like, I'm gonna go out and get this special thing for dinner, even if you can't leave the house. Like make it elevate the food. Go buy filet mignon. Like do something that like you're not tipping, you're not buying drinks. It's gonna be cheaper. Do something that like maybe you don't always do. Like you have to be intentional about it.
We got like the clay where you can make the clay with your hands. We got one of them for the house, the little pottery wheels. We've
Oh,
done like
fun.
paint by numbers, all of these things that when you say to the average person, they're like, "Oh, my partner would never do that. I could never get my partner to do that." And I just sometimes sit there and say, "How hard is it to want to spend time together? Like to want to actually have fun together?" Because I know that when our kids are old enough and they don't want to come on holiday with us, you bet your ass we're still going to the water park because
Yeah.
we've always enjoyed having that fun together and that like let's just be big kids and let's just explore life. And if you can't enjoy that when your kids are little, how on earth are you going to enjoy that when you're 60 and 70 and your kids no longer
Yeah.
that?
No, I completely agree. Because yeah, I mean, you guys were there before the kids. That's the thing. You guys were there before the kids. You decided to be partners in life, not just partners in parenthood. And so like here we are. You have to keep it alive 100%. And it also like it gets boring. Like let's be real, it gets boring. And I guarantee one of the things that I tell women to say to their partner if they say stuff like that, like, "Oh, I could never get my husband to do that or watch that movie or whatever." One of the things I kind of give them to say to like initiate a conversation with their partner is, are you happy right now? Are you happy with the way things are? Do you want things to stay like this? Is this fulfilling to you? Because there's no malice behind that question. I mean, unless you sit there and you say, "Are you fucking happy right now?" Like, obviously, you're not saying
With the
that,
cheers.
without the attitude. If you say, like, "Are you happy right now? What's stopping you from doing this fun thing with me? Why don't you want to do it with me, honey?" I mean, there are going to be people who are going to come back at you with because it's stupid or, whatever. Maybe they're stuck in their own shit. But I think it's hard to. I think it's hard if you really walk up to your partner, guards down, get rid of the ego and say, "Are you happy right now with the way things are? How can we, are you content to sit here like this? Why don't you want to have fun with me?"
And
And then
sometimes
stop talking and wait.
sometimes you have to be so unhappy that you breach the and this is any area of life, right? Whether that be business, money, career, whatever. You have to be so unhappy that you're willing to get to that point of this is no longer serving me. This is not
Yeah.
adding value to my life. This is not serving me in any capacity. And until you can get to that point, I guarantee that you are going to stay stagnated. You are going to stay in this big bowl of frustration. I actually just want to go back to the thing about like going out on date night because the thing that flashed into my head is it's not even about going out on date night or the food or any of those things. Sometimes it's how I can dress up and I can just feel like not a mom, like you might do the school run in your sweatpants and like you're out the door and you're just rushing to do life. And like sometimes I just want to spend 2 hours getting ready just because I can and I want to
Yes.
feel good. And yes, I can do that on a random Tuesday, but then I want to go somewhere fancy and I
Mhm.
just want to like have the ambience that comes from not just us building that intimacy.
Yes, I completely agree. Well, and it speaks to being human, I think. Like you're not just mom and dad. This is you getting to be, yourself. This is me getting to be Jess, him getting to be John. And, you know, there's a lot to be said about the energy behind getting yourself ready. Like we talk about rituals all the time. Like I actually, that was my entire Instagram story this morning is like, how do you ritualize your life so that you feel like yourself? Like it's easy to get
Mm.
stuck in the mundane of like, yeah, let's get up, let's like put the sweatpants on, let's do this, let's do that, got to get to school. But we can infuse that time with like our essence, like we can sit there and say like, what do I feel the most like myself? Let me wear that for date night so I can step back into that energy because you come back as a mom so refreshed when you do shit like that for
Oh,
yourself.
yes,
Feel like a whole new
absolutely.
person. And you have more patience with the kids. I don't know about you. I have so much more patience with the kids when I've had like even half a day. to put makeup on and or whatever, blow my hair out or something and not just put a baseball cap on. Like it makes a difference around the house.
Absolutely. And when I feel good, I'm a better parent. If I don't feel good, my patience is thin, the energy's off, and that's why Lewis sat me down and said, "You look tired," because yes, we had date night on Saturday and the kids slept at my mom's, but her partner wasn't well, so we dropped them off at 5 p.m. because they had kids parties, and we picked them up at 10 a.m. And when I
Oh, so it
got
was like
there,
quick then. Yeah.
Freddie was like hysterical. He was straight into tantrum mode. Obviously, he was feeling a little bit crabby, so I think he was just overwhelmed. But it was like, oh, I haven't had enough time to get to that point of I feel good again. And I think
Hmm.
that's been huge because, you know, I think there's so much pressure of you'll go on date night or you'll have a night away and you'll suddenly then miss your kids and want to be around them. I will admit this weekend I could have gone another 3 days without them just to refresh because the sleepless nights, the tiredness, like the just the energy, I just needed more. And that's why Lewis had to say, well, you're gonna have to give yourself more. You're gonna have to miss out on school run this week. You're gonna have to sleep more. You're gonna have to buck out your morning schedule. Like you need to do what you need to do so you can get to the point of feeling that fresh vibe again. And there's no shame within that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that's also why sometimes it is nice to plan out like a weekend where maybe both of you, maybe you don't have a date night, but maybe you plan a weekend where like, okay, mommy gets to sleep on Saturday morning, daddy gets to sleep on Sunday morning, or mommy gets
We
to
all
go
turn
for
at that every
yes,
weekend.
yes, yeah, you flip flop because you both do need it and it can't just be like, well, I do this all week and so you have to do that. It needs to be like this even exchange. But you got me thinking about something that I want to bring up, and I don't know if this has happened to you guys when you do have date night, like let's say you plan date nights regularly, like maybe twice a month or whatever, there I think, and I've talked to other parents about this too, you kind of get to a point where sometimes there's so much pressure on that one night
Yes.
that it becomes almost like overwhelming and this need to have a good time and feel like myself kind of takes over. And so when little tiny things don't go right, you get disappointed and it kind of turns into this like fight or back and forth or disappointment. And you're like, wow, I wish I had this, that. And then date night's not really date night. Date night is a night where you're kind of pissed off at each other or whatever. That shit happens too, where you kind of place all of your energy and all of your bets on this one fucking night and you're holding so tightly to what date night means that
Yeah.
all of a sudden there's too much emphasis on it and it's too much and it gets overwhelming.
Ooh, and this reminds me of when, like, when you're going on a family day out and you've booked the
Yes.
family day out, and everyone's like, this day's gonna be so good, and you build it up, and then before you go, the kids are tantruming, you're arguing because you can't find the water bottle and this, and you get in
Yep.
the car and no one's speaking to each other, and you're like, yeah, we're gonna have a really great day, and then like everything in the day just goes to fucking shit.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Totally.
I think it's because we do put too much pressure on it. And I know the days that like are the best days are the ones where spontaneously we'll just start running around the house with the kids and like we're playing
Mhm.
games and it all happens. Like Lewis does this thing where he dresses up as a pirate and he switches the lights on and off like it's lightning and tells a bedtime story. But if we force that, there's no vibe there. There's no energy there. Like it has to happen organically. And I feel like you have to get comfortable as a parent that sometimes the planning of everything is what suffocates it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's something that we just 2 weeks ago, I freaked out. It was like a Sunday and I was like, ugh, like it was like, what are we doing today? And I'm like, getting ready for the week. Yay, it's Sunday. I was like,
Yeah.
fuck this. I was like, fuck this. We're dividing up the chores. Everyone's getting shit done in the morning and we're just doing whatever we want for the rest of the day because like I can't take it. And John was like, yeah, fuck this. Let's go to Cracker Barrel, like
Yes.
kind of were like, we can't do it. And we had to do something similar with date night for a little while. We first of all, we stopped calling it date night for a while because we would be like, hey, date night's coming, date night's coming. And then at the end of the night, we were like, we just fucked up date night. Like
Yeah.
we had to start calling it alone time. We'd be like, okay, we're having alone time because even no, that's not the right word, whatever. Even like the idea of the word date night started to become this pressure because life was so wild with the kids that we were like, this is all we have is this one night to be human. And we were like, we need to infuse this date night energy into the nights that we're home the rest of the week, like have moments together. And I'm going to tell you guys, I'm going to give you an example that's going to probably help um, if you try it. But infuse these little moments into the rest of the week. And also, yeah, stop putting like you can plan it and let it go then. Plan it and then just do it. Stop looking for, ways that it's going to go wrong. Maybe try and like swerve when things don't work. and like spend time together. I want to know what's popping up in your head because you're choking, and I feel like that means you're about to
That's my
go.
throat. No, I was finding myself, obviously we're getting married this year, so I was finding myself looking at going on a honeymoon, and I've never been away from the kids for a period of time. And I feel like that's partly because one, my parents were separated, so we'd go to my dad's in the summer and we'd be away from my mom and it'd be like really chaotic. And then my dad would do this thing where he'd go away with his wife and not tell my mom. And so once I broke my arm and she was ringing him and he wasn't answering, and he was in the chopping Maldives living his best life. I'm in the hospital getting an operation. My mom can't get hold of him. And it's built this huge stress about like being away for too long. And so we've had nights away, but we've never had more than one night. And my mom rang and she was like, just so you know, you can go away for like 5 nights for your honeymoon if you want. And I was like, oh my God,
Whoa.
like, do I want that? Can we do that? Like, is that allowed? And now I found myself thinking, do you know what? Like, I am gonna do that because I think in the past maybe I've been slightly judgmental. If someone's like, oh, we're going on holiday without the kids, I'm like, what? You're going on holiday where without the kids? But
Mhm.
now I'm like, actually, I'm gonna soak that up. I'm gonna enjoy it. I'm not gonna feel bad because imagine again how that's just gonna fuel our connection with self after getting married and the
Yes.
connection of marriage and really just bond us back into that intimacy together.
And I think it's also important to think about like, as much as it's hard for us to separate from the kids are also getting this like really fun experience with a family member. You know what I mean? Like they're gonna get
Yes.
with your mom for those days.
You
Like
can
that's
give them 100%.
yes, yeah. Like the grandparent time is totally different than parent time. It's like a yes day all day, every day. And like, they get those core memories with their grandparents, which is really exciting. So I think it's important to remind ourselves like, okay, it's okay to be gone for multiple days at a time. The kids don't feel abandoned. They are with somebody that they love, that kind of thing. Because it is hard to separate. I completely get that. But having more than one night is so essential because you get to sleep and also have fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think grandparents are so special in the sense of number one, like the things that we used to get told no to, the kids just get free reign on all
Yeah.
the time. But I feel like I'll watch my mom with the kids, and in some ways I'm like, oh, I wish I could be that person to the kids. It's so
Mhm.
weird. Like I'll
I
find
know, I
myself
get it.
watching my mom with the kids and thinking, I just wish I could be that person. But because she doesn't have them 24/7 every
Yeah,
single
can
day,
be.
she can be that person. She can provide in that way. And so
Mhm.
I think, we have to get to a point of missing our kids. And sometimes you're not going to get that through date night. And so I feel like
Yeah.
we have to get curious about what it could look like if we could actually miss our children. Not all the time, but sometimes so that we could
Sometimes,
actually
yeah.
spend more time with them in a present way.
Yeah, and I think I think it's true. It makes you be way more intentional and present when you're with them because it's a thing. Like we all want to be with our kids all the time. And there is that moment when you leave them where you're like, "Ugh, this is fucking weird," or whatever. But I think it's also important. It's important developmentally for them to know how to deal with not being us 24/7 because also they're going to go to school. They're going to do all these things and it's like it's hard for me because I like Gabe is more independent. Ava would still be like, in a sling if I could keep her there. Like she wants to be with me 24/7. And I think it's important to like look at the kids and recognize what kind of kid they are too and be like, okay, maybe this kid does need more independence because it's going to serve her in the long run. And like, does it break my heart to tell Ava, like, okay, yeah, you have to go do this thing without me? Yeah, of course it fucking does. I'm sitting there with like sending Reiki all day, and that's fine, but it's what she needs. Gabe gets out of the car and he's like, see ya. And he like runs. Ava's like, Mom, you're gonna be back at 2. And I'm like, yes, I will be back at 2, but like you can hold two emotions at once. You can miss me and have fun. Go. And I think it's important for them to experience that and realize like they're surviving. Like you are independent, you're okay.
Absolutely. And I don't know how anybody homeschools, like in today's day and age where the majority of households you have to work. I don't know how anyone homeschools. Like if you are listening to this and you homeschool, please like offer something because I have no idea how you hold it all.
I think I think you have to have a very specific natal chart to
Yeah.
be able to do it because I've seen it's so funny because I agree. I completely agree. Like I know that my kids need the independence and I sure as fuck
And
am not mom long.
I don't know about you, but I actually find the promotion of it quite toxic Because if you go on Instagram, there's so much
Mhm.
about like homeschool children, like this. It like my daughter's confidence in starting school, she was a lockdown baby. She's a completely different human being. She's more centered in herself. She knows herself. She has more independence. Like she's a different child for all the best possible scenarios. And I see all this like homeschool content thrown out there, which if it's right for you, it's right for you. But I
Yeah.
do feel and I do worry that people are pressurized into thinking again, I'm not doing enough as a mom. Am I giving my child enough? Oh my God, I'm not homeschooling. So this means this. At the end of the day, if you're a working mom, you have a business, or you just don't fucking want to be with your kids
Yeah,
24/7,
it's
we can't
okay.
feel bad for that.
No, I agree. I think there's a lot of social media content kind of being shoved down our throats right now about who we should be or shouldn't be as because it's like, there's all these big granted, I mean, I did just need my fucking sourdough on this podcast episode, but there's all this content about homesteading and like, the way that we should be doing it. Look, there's balance. There's a fucking balance to everything because we are not just one thing as human beings. That's why I think my podcast is called Multifaceted Mama. We have all these different parts to ourselves and you're not just one thing. And if you're somebody like it's my oldest best friend has actually been homeschooling her kids way before it was popular. Like her kids went to elementary school and then she was like, and now we're homeschooling. She is so content with her life, so fucking happy. She doesn't that's what fills her. She fuel and then there are nights where she's like, get me the fuck out of here. I'm coming over. We're, having, whatever, wine and decorating our Kindles and whatever. And I love that about her because she's not stuck in this homeschooling mindset. It just works for her. And if that's you, then absolutely fine. But there's a lot of us that won't work for. Like I know I couldn't do that. This is this connection, me and you right now, Rosie. That's what I needed today. You know what I mean? Like I need to be able to
Yes.
sit here and talk about this and I need to know like my kids are learning and whatever. Gabe was the same. Gabe was born 2 months into lockdown. So he was like, we were his entire world and that was it. And school started and I expected this kid to not want to leave. He was out the fucking door. He was so happy. He totally social, maybe cried one random day, like whatever, and it's what he needs. It's what is needed. And Ava, like she's a fashionista little superstar. Like she wants to get dressed in the morning and like she wants to be with me all the time, but when she's at school and she's fine. And I think there's something to be said for not making other moms feel guilty for not wanting to be mom 20. It's not about I don't even think it's necessarily about not wanting to be with your kids 24/7. It's about not wanting to have to be one identity constantly.
Yes. And also, how do you get everything else done when you're trying to be mom and
Mhm.
teacher and all of the things? But if you're listening to this and you have questions for us, drop them down below and then we can answer and maybe choose some podcast episodes based on what you guys want.
Yes.